Okay, hello, Booknerds. Welcome to another podcast, and this is going to be super exciting because today we are doing something different. Okay, so every time we have a new author, a new book coming in, but this time it's extra special because we have an owner of an iconic bookstore which is situated in Bombay, and I should call it Mumbai actually. And it's called Kitab Khana. I mean, for those of you who don't know about the store, it has been running for I think so. It started in 2011, if I'm not
That's
wrong,
right,
and it's
2011.
nearly 10 years. And it has been a tough year for the bookstore, and of course, the entire book industry in general, especially independent bookstores. So we'll be talking about all of that. Plus, let me introduce you first to Mr. Samir Somaiya, who is an industrialist and he told me a little bit earlier that he creates a lot of trouble in the bookstore. So at Kitab Khana, so we'll discuss all of that. He is a chemical engineer, if I am not wrong, and he wears so many hats. It's incredible. So we'll talk about so much in of course the book space and how Kitab Khana came about, and if you want to ask him anything, you can just leave the questions in the comment section. That would be great, and we can, of course, answer them later. Welcome, Samir.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. Thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Great. So let me get right into it. I read this lovely scroll article, which gave us the entire journey of how Kitab Khana happened and what has been going on. Take us through the inception because a lot of people might not know about how it came about.
So, we run a business and we own a very beautiful, iconic building in Fort Mumbai, which is right in the heart of downtown Mumbai.
Right.
And this building is from the 1880s or maybe
Okay.
1890s. So it's a very
Okay.
beautiful building. And when the bank that we had rented it to left because the rent act changed,
Yeah.
what I always so books and bookshops is for me something very special.
Right.
Wherever I travel, I always look for books and I look for bookshops. And
Wonderful.
ideally, it's wonderful to see books of a particular area to not only see what the area is reading, but also what that particular area may be writing and
Okay.
what you could discover in or about that area. And so
Right.
I think bookshops give you a lovely place. And so I always felt that Mumbai needed a very lovely bookshop
Okay.
and in a very nice setting.
Right.
One in which I told my father-in-law who designed it कि दिल ढूंढता है फिर वही फुर्सत के रात दिन उस
Wow.
तरह का चैन अगर जो वो पिक्चर मौसम में आने उस तरह का
Wow.
चैन अगर हम खड़ा करें.
Right.
So this is what we wanted to do, my wife and I.
Okay.
And my dad owned the building, so it took me I had to convince him, but he blessed it because he is the one who inspired love of reading in me.
Okay.
And we created this gorgeous bookshop,
Yeah.
Kitab Khana. Yeah.
I'm I'm feeling so guilty right now because I went to Bombay a couple of times recently, and I couldn't visit the store, and I went to some other store. I won't name it. So I
Any bookshop is a good bookshop.
Yeah, of course. I mean, but the boutique bookstores which provide that experience, it's not as if I'm talking to you, I'm saying that. Just, I share the same passion, so I would have loved to visit, but next time I'm sure I will visit and we'll come to whatever has happened this year and, of course, other things which are not so good. But before that, a little bit about the independent bookstore ecosystem. How do you see it? How is it evolving? And what's going to happen perhaps after the pandemic?
Uh, so, books, it's not running a bookstore is not the most, it has to be a labor of love
Yep.
and passion.
Yep.
They don't very much justify themselves on commerce.
Yep.
So independent bookstores, therefore, according to me, will sustain, and
Okay.
they will sustain because of that passion and because of that labor of love. Because I think that's why the world sustains itself
Right.
because of these things. And if I look upon even the you mentioned we'll come across this difficult, but the fire we had.
Yeah.
But soon after the fire, the number of people who've written to us, from little children. My wife got a beautiful letter from a 12-year-old
Okay.
who wants to help fundraise to try and get the bookshop together, to the
Wow.
local policeman on the beat who also comes in and steps inside,
Right.
to the local journalist, to the local, people of all shapes, and from all over the world. We've got people from Singapore who wrote day before yesterday that she will not buy that book until we come back on in when we are reopened in our physical form.
Wow. Wow.
So I think people want bookshops, or rather, I don't want to call it like a bookshop, but these are places where you open your minds and you explore
Right.
ideas.
Yeah.
So they want those places where they can wander around, which it's not necessary that an electronic format will give you. So you
Right.
want that sense. Through the pandemic, the Independent Bookstore Association of India has been formed. I think there have been people who formed it, and we've just become a member.
Oh
I
yes,
think we
I think the Storyteller bookstore in Kolkata told us about this, and this has happened. So that's a good direction, perhaps.
Yeah, I think my wife Amrita, who couldn't join us today, she's actually very much in touch with them. So I
Okay.
think this will grow, and we will learn to lean on each other and support each other and
Right.
learn from each other as we go on.
Right.
So I
Yeah.
really think, but bookstores or bookshops, especially those which capture the soul of reading, and you know the pen is mightier than the sword kind of lines.
Yeah.
You need the community to understand that these are necessary,
True.
part of living a life in a city or a village. Libraries, bookshops, they need to be there.
Oh, yes, of course. Let's talk about the team a little bit. I will come back to the fire that happened, but let's talk about the team. How does everything work? Because I mean, I'm sure it's a hard task, coming up with experiences, new experiences, and keeping it relevant in these digital times. So tell us a little bit about the team.
No, I think, if you give from the very start creation of the space, or I'll go first, to my dad who owned the building, and for him first to,
Yeah,
shall I say, bless the idea of a bookshop.
of
Although
course.
we had to kind of um, ask him and convince him, but he actually then permitted or allowed or encouraged the use of that as a bookshop. If you go in that order: permitted, allowed, encouraged. So that is always wonderful, because you know that a bookshop is going to be a labor of love.
Of
That's
course.
one.
Yeah,
And the next was then to ask my father-in-law to design the space. If you look at it, the Harvard Coop in Cambridge,
yeah,
that was the kind of physical imagery that we gifted or we gave, and to try and create an atmosphere.
yeah.
Um, Amrita, my wife, who actually runs the bookshop, we own it together. She is the person who came up with such lots of ideas about how to keep the bookshop encouraged, and how to engage with the visitors who keep coming,
Right.
and defying all my expectations, making sure that year on year more people came into the books in the last 10 years. There's never been a year, other than this pandemic year,
Yeah.
where the footfalls have decreased or even plateaued. They've continued
Wonderful.
to grow.
Wonderful.
Jagat is the person who was at Strand bookstore. He was Strand is iconic in Mumbai.
Yeah.
Mr. Shanbag was known to my dad, and I used to, in fact, visit Strand with my father.
Yeah.
But he was actually looking for a job at that time, and we started a bookstop not knowing. We planned this bookstore not knowing, or planned Kitab Khana not knowing who will manage it for us. And a good friend, couple of ours, Arvind and Vinita Kanoria, they kind of said, why don't you talk to Jagat? And Jagat came, and then a lot of his people from, some from Strand came and
Yeah.
helped set it up.
Yeah.
And then we have also a whole bunch of groups. We have Mansi, who does the social media. We have Niyati, who talks about reviews. And so we have there's so many people
Right.
who there. And so it's a whole team that works. There are, from people who keep the bathrooms clean. I think it's all necessary. It's part of the experience. It's from that watchman who, the security guard when you come in, and who gives you a delightful namaste when you enter the
Oh
shop.
yes.
So I think the whole thing makes the space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we started primarily as a book club. We even now we have a book club which meets online now, of course. But previously we used to meet offline in Dehradun and at these cute cafes and stuff, and sometimes at bookstores. So, how do you see the co-opting of bookstores with book clubs and perhaps sort of intimate book events? Have you been doing that for a while? What's happening on
I
in
think
that?
book events we've been doing from the day we started.
Acha, okay,
We've always been doing book events, and we've been a place for people to come and launch their books. And they've been, in a sense, curated events, which means but it's been there from day one.
okay,
We've also been a venue for the Kabir Festival, for example, where you
right,
mix in performances along with the readings.
right,
Um, we've been a place for poetry readings. We've been a place for, in fact, recently we started Tuesday translations,
okay,
and you had. So uh, I think it's very much part of how you engage with the community.
right.
We've been a place where kids love to come. When the Kala Ghoda festival
Oh,
takes
yeah,
place in Mumbai, we are a venue for the Kala Ghoda festival.
yeah,
So it's just very we like to feel that we need to be a fabric of the city. Yeah. And we've been very strongly feeling multilingual. I went to Universal Bookstores in Lucknow,
yeah, yeah.
and I saw how they presented Hindi, Urdu, and
They
English
have a
books.
fabulous collection actually. They have,
Yes.
yeah, yeah.
So we made it a point that we should also have Gujarati, Marathi, Hindi,
Okay,
Sanskrit, and even Urdu books alongside English. We shouldn't think that the written word, especially our kids, shouldn't think the written word is only in the English script.
right. Completely, completely. So, tell us about the impact of pandemic and of course the fire that happened recently in December. What happened exactly? Because a lot of readers have been impacted by that. I know for a fact. For example, I was telling you about my sister. She knows about the bookstore, and a lot of readers have been impacted by that, and it's a setback to the entire community. So, what exactly happened, and how are we going to, sort of come back from it?
Well, the pandemic itself was or is a problem.
Yeah,
Complete shutdown, complete lockdown,
true.
and of course, right after the lockdown itself, we did poetry readings with 60 poets across the country over 14 days. But that
Okay,
doesn't take away from the fact that your business comes to complete halt.
right.
And so it was very difficult. And when the lockdown was lifted, even though we allowed people, first it was just deliveries. That means you come, pick up, and go. And
Right.
then when you open it up a little more, then you can come no more than 10 people at a time in the store and all
Yeah.
that. So I think footfalls collapsed to 10%
Wow.
of what otherwise would be.
Hmm.
Fire actually was an unfortunate accident. It happened in the kitchen. We have a very nice cafe there,
Okay.
food for thought.
Yeah.
And there was a fire in the kitchen,
Yeah.
and the fire, um, ultimately the fire got wood and books to
Right.
feast on. So that was a tough one. So now we
Yeah.
are trying to pick up the pieces. We have a 10th anniversary, which we wanted to celebrate in
Yeah.
March.
Yeah.
And we are now targeting and hoping that we can reopen before that.
Oh, wonderful.
It
Claps
is
to
a,
that.
it is a, it is like a statement of good intention, which we hope to achieve. That is
Oh,
our aim.
yes. I mean, best of luck for that. I'm sure that such a passionate team would be able to pull it off and come back from this. And yeah, let's talk about books. You said that you had the kind of exposure to reading growing up, and you were working in a completely different you are working kind of in a completely different industry. So how to keep it kindled, and why this passion only? Because you must have had a bunch of options, right?
No, so growing up, my grandfather, grandmom, my mom, dad, so grandparents were not very high. Grandfather must have done sixth or seventh standard education. But, growing up, books were all around our house. So whether they were Hindi books, Sanskrit books,
Yeah.
Gujarati books, Marathi books, Hindi books, or the ghazals, also in the
Right.
Devanagari script.
Yeah.
So always grew up seeing the printed word all around us.
Yeah.
And every now and then, but of course, I grew up reading, Hardy Boys and Agatha Christie.
Yeah.
until my dad really was keen that I should expose myself to the world of non-fiction or
Okay.
other fiction.
Okay.
What he couldn't convince me, he had a friend of his called Rushi Kumar Pandya
Okay.
get me to do. And I read a lot of that. I then also went to the US to study where even if you studied engineering, it was important to learn to have a rounded education. So I
Yeah.
think my love of reading grew and intensified there.
Okay.
And wherever would travel would again, enjoy the bookstores.
Yeah.
Um, Back in India, and wherever you went in the world, I would love to see whether it was in Amsterdam, it was in Haarlem, the Netherlands, it was
Yeah.
in Paris, or it was in, as I said, Lucknow, the Universal Booksellers,
Of
which I
course.
really like. And then when I've, so and then so the when in Mumbai we just tried to create this kind of a
Yeah.
space, I think. So
Yeah.
yeah,
So I mean, you have traveled
but
widely. Yeah.
yeah, no, but so in terms of the reading, and then the other sense was how do you create this passion. The other sense was for me that I wanted to also create a sense of knowing my literature, the
Okay.
literature of the country I'm in,
Right.
and also in its languages.
Okay.
So I was a little surprised at some point to realize that my Hindi reading because of my stay abroad had become poorer. Then
Yeah.
I made a conscious effort to start reading again, whether it's Manto, Giriraj Kishore. I read Pehla Girmitiya.
Yeah.
I read Shivaji Savant's Mrityunjay, which is actually Marathi, but I read it in the Hindi translation.
Okay. Okay.
And then Gujarati, I couldn't read, but I taught myself how to read.
Right. Right.
So I think it is just, I think literature, it's a storehouse of culture.
Yeah.
Languages are a storehouse of culture.
Yeah.
And, I think we need to keep our culture growing, preserve, sustain, and grow.
Right. So I talk to a lot of youngsters, and I mean, they want to read, of course, but you are also a leader, right? So how to incorporate all this knowledge into what you are doing? Perhaps a lot of people are working on something else, but they love to read. So how to kind of draw from this and incorporate that in your work, and how to do that, maintain a balance also at the same time.
No, one is, I run a university. I'm a
Yeah.
chancellor of Somaiya Vidyavihar
Yes.
University. So we are trying to
Yes.
create an entire environment in which rounded education is encouraged.
Yeah.
So if you are a tech person, you should have exposure to the languages and the literature, and reverse if you
Wow.
are doing the humanities. So I think that is stuff that we need to encourage.
Yeah.
Secondly, we've taken it upon ourselves in some villages in rural Gujarat right now,
Okay.
where we've set up, and even in Maharashtra, where we're setting up, in Karnataka, where we're setting up libraries.
Okay.
The students do need to see the richness and also have great educators who help them explore that richness. So in the
Right.
schools, we run a lot of village schools and in the city,
Okay.
and we also are going into some villages and setting up libraries. I think we
Wonderful.
want to expose students to, as I said, the just to see the written word, and also then to expand it.
Yeah.
And then, my mom had Sjogren's syndrome, and she suffered from an autoimmune disease. The last few years of her life, she had to stay in her room because she could catch an infection very easily. What we are all experiencing
Yeah.
collectively today, she
Yeah.
was facing it individually about a couple of years ago, and
Okay.
for 3 years. And her world, I saw it. She kept being happy because of books. She read, and her world was big.
Yeah.
So
So I see that you have put in a lot of work. I mean, and not everybody does that. But the libraries and especially the bookshops have dwindled a lot. I mean, in numbers also, and also the quality. So how can we, do better? Because I mean, everybody has to contribute. But it's not really happening. Whatever I notice, because the public libraries are going down in the experience, uh, and of course the books are there, but kind of the congenial environment is not there, perhaps.
I think we got to define what book the person when you enter a bookshop or a library. If it is Jagat and our team,
Yeah.
what are they going to guide you to?
Okay.
And how are they going to understand who you are,
Yeah.
and what direction they can show you books.
Okay.
Similarly, for a person in a library,
Yeah.
How are the teachers or the librarian going to see so the library, we created a library. I come from a small village called Tera in Kutch, and so we
Okay.
actually took over a small heritage old building. Everything is heritage, actually. I can't call it separate heritage because old
Yeah.
villages are all entirely heritage.
Right.
But we rented one and we converted into a lovely library, and there was a wonderful headmaster of the local school
Okay.
who immediately said that, we don't have a library. Can we use this as a library for our kids? And
Yeah.
just imagine how powerful that is.
Yeah.
And so I think you need people to understand the power of books and expose the children, and then the world becomes wide.
Right.
And
You know.
similarly in a bookshop, if you have Sanjeev there, or if you have Jagat there, or if you have
Yeah.
so many people there, somebody show you all these things, and the world will change.
Right. So what I can figure out is that the person who is interacting with you in the bookstore or that point or in the library needs to be passionate, right? I mean, if the passion is not there, then it might not seep down to the reader, perhaps.
Then you also need to curate the books. No, it's not only what you expose; it's also what you
Right.
have.
Yes.
You need to be able to show the books that you have,
Yeah.
and you should also be kind of directing. When I said I create some trouble, because sometimes I would say, do we have this kind of book? Do we have a book on this topic?
Oh, yeah.
Because I think bookshops are a place where ideas are exchanged.
Right.
So they are not commercial spaces. As I said, commercially they don't
Yeah.
simply work. They're a place where an idea exchange. So you need to, I'm reading a book called Living Downstream right now. It deals with
Okay.
cancer, and
Yeah.
it deals with the exchange of, how we are living our lives today and of cancer. So I think these thoughts need to come out into
Right.
the open for us to then explore them.
Right. On that count, let's talk about. I don't know if you got time this year to read a lot, but a lot of us read a lot because of the situation we were in. I mean, I work in the industry kind of, so I have to read. But did you get time? And if yes, what were your top books? What did you manage to read this year?
Now, I'm pretty bad about finishing books, so I'm reading books all the time.
Okay.
I read one full Hindi book called Chanakya. I don't recall the author. With
Okay.
real apologies, I don't recall but I enjoyed. It was a
Okay.
Hindi book on Chanakya.
Okay.
I've been reading. I also been reading non fiction.
Okay.
I've been reading right now. To be very honest, I read Anti Fragile by
Okay.
Nicholas
Okay.
Taleb.
Okay.
I'm also I'm reading the Hitopadesh
Okay.
uh, in Sanskrit with English translation. That is this one.
Oh, nice.
Um,
Okay.
and I'm a little bit of a nerd, so I'm also reading one of my old chemical engineering textbooks on air pollution control right now.
Oh, wonderful.
So it's not the you don't want to hear all these things from me. I love to read poetry. I
Okay.
love to read
Great.
the Shero Shairi
Wow.
selections. I enjoy that. I saw um, on your Facebook page that you had Rahat Indori.
Yes,
You
yes.
acknowledged him, so I like reading. I like reading um, all that kind of stuff. So yeah,
Great,
yeah.
great, awesome. So of course, the bookstore association, the Independent Bookstore Association, came together. What are the kind of? I wanted some insider info. But what are the kind of things you talk about? Because it's
Actually,
yeah.
my wife would know better. Amrita is
Oh,
not here
yes,
today
of
with
course.
us. But I think they're talking, as I said in the beginning, about leaning on each other, learning
Yeah,
from each other,
yeah,
and also helping each other, and try
right,
to create an ecosystem where good independent bookstores,
yeah,
um, and this really are a support system for each other,
yeah, right.
and we grow. May our tribe increase.
Of course,
I really think.
yeah,
I mean, I we've created this bookshop because we think bookshops like this are
yeah,
necessary. And if the support we've received in terms of pure words and promises of support just by
right,
the fire from young and old, far and wide, it just shows how much people appreciate
yeah,
such places.
right. Uh, I mean, it's great to see that passion, and of course, it's hard to find such a team. I mean, Best of luck for that. And it was great talking to you. I
Pleasure.
mean, I have so many questions in my head, but I look forward to visiting Kitab Khana
Please
first.
do. Please
And
do.
before I end, I wanted to ask you about the digital space. How do you plan on kind of, because I mean, I have to talk about Amazon. I mean,
Yes.
it's so, how do we, kind of not fight, but, kind of exist in the same ecosystem, but still stay relevant, because it's kind of, troubling to see that happening.
So I also have a Kindle. Okay,
Okay.
I
Okay.
own a Kindle. When I travel, I'm not. I normally will carry a couple of physical books and my
Yeah.
Kindle. I definitely prefer having the physical book um, to read if I have a choice.
Yeah.
Um, I think again I want to come back that I think um, s- I think the a bookstore allows you to open. The bookstore is an interesting space between a library, a bookstore, and a Amazon or a digital space.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think the bookstore, physical bookstore, is very alive,
Yeah.
and you've got your shopping there or browsing there or sitting there with many people around you,
Right. Yeah.
with you. You'll
Yeah.
run into somebody whom you don't know, and
Yeah.
you might just exchange. Have you read that book? That book is a really nice book, and I think that you can't do. And truly, if you want to, I think, encourage change or see a world, I think that's what these spaces are. So
Yeah.
I think there's convenience in something like Amazon,
Yeah.
but I think there is life in something in a
True. True.
Kitab Khana or other
It's
independent
too passive.
bookstores.
I mean,
Yeah,
Amazon. Let's be honest. It's too passive. I mean, who doesn't want to visit a bookstore and pick out a book and meet someone new? Meet a
yeah,
new reader. Why not? And
yeah,
go to some book live events, and especially book events.
yeah.
What's your favorite? This is my final question, because I don't want to rabble lamon on for another half an hour. What was your favorite event of all time at Kitab Khana? Your favorite?
Oh gosh, bad. I don't remember.
I put you on the spot on that one.
You put me on the spot. Uh, I don't remember the event, but I remember the imagery around the event. Kitab Khana has a mezzanine,
Okay.
and that event was completely packed from the bottom all over the
Wow.
mezzanine.
Wow.
I don't remember. I'm being very honest here. I
Yeah.
don't want to make up. I don't remember the
Yeah. Yeah.
event. I like to say that I also enjoyed Kabir festivals, but those are more
Right.
music over there. But
Yeah.
the event which I'm really talking about was, yeah, I don't remember it, but I still remember it was electric, and
Wow.
yeah, electric with authors over there, brilliantly.
I was just talking to my co-founder. By the way, she's my wife. So
Right.
her name is Neha. So I was just talking to her, and we were just missing the electricity,
Yeah,
of those offline events. I mean, they need to come back
yeah.
for all of us. So and on that count, thank you so much,
Thank you
and
so much.
looking forward to more conversations in the future,
Pleasure.
perhaps.
And let
And
us meet someday in
oh,
person.
definitely, that's going to happen.
Yeah.
That's going to happen,
Yeah. And I welcome all your readers or listeners right now.
of course.
We hope to be reopening soon,
Yeah.
and it would be delightful to welcome you again in that place where we feel timeless.
Yes. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so
Thank
much.
you so much.
Pleasure.
Bye.
Pleasure.
Bye.